What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. As you've seen in the title of this video, we're breaking down the Losi LMT today, going through it and cleaning it up, maybe freshening up some of those fluids. Surprisingly enough, I haven't really been through this truck much. I got it in and started bashing it. Never really had many issues with it at all. I don't even think I've ever been inside the axles actually. Obviously I changed up the body and the wheels and tires, but that is it. No problems with it at all, until recently. If you've seen my last video with this truck, you know what I'm about to show you. And you probably noticed we're missing a shock here. And well, I took it apart here, but the shock shaft actually pulled completely out of the piston, tore through the bladder. I posted a picture of that over on my Instagram if you didn't see it. And the shaft came completely out the bottom half of the shock. I'll get a couple close-up shots of these parts so you can see what I'm really talking about here. I ordered a rebuild kit for the shocks, so we're gonna go ahead and rebuild all 4 shocks just to make sure they're all nice and fresh. And as you can see, this thing's really dusty here, so I'm gonna clean it up, probably pull the axles apart, re-grease everything. We may change a little bit of diff fluid as well, and have us a nice fresh truck. Get back out there bashing. I have a feeling this might take a little while, so let's get started. Someone forgot to turn the mic on, but basically I wanted to start off with the shocks, but I realized I'm out of shock oil. So for now, we'll get them out the way. I ordered some more, so it should be here by the end of the week so we can get this video finished up. What I think I want to do is start on the axles now. I'll start on the rear one so we don't have to worry about that servo just yet. If this is your first time seeing me do a teardown on a truck, you probably noticed I'm putting the screws back in their places. This just helps me not to lose any or forget where they go. You can see now I got the axle off of the truck and it's still pretty dusty. I like to clean this with just a little cleaner or a degreaser and an old toothbrush and then wipe it away with a rag. So I've actually never pulled apart an LMT axle before, so like I always say, looks like you're about to learn along with me. It looks like we'll have to pull these lockouts out just to get the axles out of the diff, just like in an SMT10. I'll have to remove my chassis brace on the bottom here, and it looks like just 4 screws and this whole assembly will pop out. So let's see if it's that easy. Something that really shocked me right off the bat, these screws to get these lockouts out are a 1.5 millimeter driver. Wasn't really expecting that. So I already know some of you guys were probably screaming at me as I was pulling those lockouts out. It looks like with a dog bone here, you may not actually have to pull those lockouts out. I'm not really 100% positive on that, but it looks like they may have a little room in there. You can definitely see how dusty inside this axle housing is. It's definitely not airtight. All inside the drive cups here. It looks like the gears themselves are pretty free of dust, but man, that's a whole lot of dust in there. I'm gonna get all this cleaned out and we'll open up that diff. Now, the last thing before we can throw this rear axle back together is gonna be to freshen up this diff oil. I believe the manual says it has 100K fluid in it, and I don't know if that really feels like 100K, so it must be worn out. It's time to change it out. You can see it's not really dirty at all. It actually doesn't look like it has a whole lot in there. We may just add a little more. Psych, I don't have any 100K, but what I do have is some 500K, which if you've seen any of my SMT10 videos, you know that's what I like to run in my SMT10. So I'm just gonna add this to both the front and the rear diff. I find in the SMT10 it helps me better with donuts and pulling off certain stunts, so hopefully it'll do the same for this truck. And now with my hands all nice and sticky, we're gonna drop this back into the axle. We're gonna throw us a little bit of grease on there. And also, just because of something I noticed, I'm gonna put just a little drop of grease in each cup here. And just like that, one axle is done. Now we do the same thing to the front and we move on. I'm cleaning up the front axle here, and I talked about it while I was doing the rear, so I decided to try it out, and turns out I was wrong. You cannot get this diff out without pulling the lockouts out, or in this case the knuckles. So there's just not enough room here, so have to pull them off. Just wanted to clear that up a little bit. Since we're talking about that though, I did want to point out you don't have to remove all 4 of these screws to release the entire hub on the knuckle here. You just have to loosen these 2 hinge pin screws here and pull the pins out, and the axle slides out enough where you can slide the diff completely out. If you just needed diff maintenance, that's the quickest way to go. I'm actually going to take both axles out considering I'm cleaning out the whole thing, but if you're just worried about maintaining the diffs, that's a quick and easy way. So I got both the axles freshened up. I didn't cover the front one much because it's essentially the same thing. All I did was took the servo off, so I didn't have to worry about that. On to the main chassis now. Cleaning wise, these twin vertical plates here are pretty simple. I could just wipe those down, but I'd like to get the transmission out of the truck to clean it up, freshen it up a bit. I'm thinking the center diff can pop out with just these 2 screws here, but I want to get the entire transmission out, not just the center diff. And if I'm being honest, I'm not exactly sure how that happens. So I'm just gonna have to start taking screws out and figure it out. I'm gonna start off with this cover. I know that this is where the pinion gear meshes with the transmission. This is also where that cool little rubber thrust bushing, I guess you could call it, is. Instead of a slipper clutch, Losi went with this. But I'm gonna get this cover out of the way and start removing screws until I get the transmission out. Holy sh**, what have I gotten myself into here? When I started looking at all the screws that I had to take off, I just turned off the camera and started pulling screws out. There was no use in me just speeding up footage and trying to show you what I was doing. Figured it would be better to talk about it after I did it, and the first thing I want to tell you is if you don't have to do this, do not. That diff pops right out the bottom just like I was talking about. If you need to service your diff, go that way. Do not take apart the whole truck like this. You can see for the most part I did accomplish my goal. I cleaned up the transmission housing and everything. Everything's all clean now for the most part and ready to put back together. But man, that was a journey for sure. We're gonna get this chassis out the way. Well, part of it anyway, out the way for now. And we're gonna focus on a couple pieces here to start putting it back together. I'm gonna be putting it back together, but if you were taking it apart, obviously you do all of these steps in a reverse order. Losi packed a whole lot of really cool engineering into this thing, but man, is it really intricate. To start out, we're gonna take this top cover, I'm gonna call it, of the center transmission, and we're gonna place it into this hole here, kind of twist into place. It sits in like that. Next up, we'll take the rest of the transmission housing, basically the bottom plate here that the links bolt into. And this has to slide into the chassis plate and up like this. Now, personally, ideally, I think you would probably install this last. That way you can slide both pieces of the chassis plate in at the same time. Problem with that is, there's a screw that goes right here. So I'm not really sure, other than maybe if you took the battery box out, you could get to that screw. I'm just gonna put it back together the way I took it apart. Okay, just to get to that stage, I'm a little embarrassed about how long it took me to get to this stage originally. The next thing we're gonna do real quick while I have this out of the truck is reinstall the diff pinion gear. This just slides up into place. It's kind of tight to get your fingers in there. You know, now that I'm looking at it, I'm gonna get it in this way. This would have been a whole lot easier to put if I'd have did it before I put this transmission housing back on. Now that gets secured with a pretty big E-clip here. I wanna say the best bet here is to go ahead and put it back onto the chassis now. Remember the hardest thing here? Oh, nope, we almost forgot something. Well, no, I'm pretty sure we could still do it afterwards. Let's do this, it'll be easier. So, we have to make sure the chassis plate slides into that groove there. It's in that side, and now it just pushes into place. Might have been a little easier if I took off some of these braces, but laziness. Now that that's on, I'm actually gonna run those screws in for those braces right quick. All right, now we're gonna bolt this plate back to the main chassis plate. This is just with some screws here and a nut on the back side. It's a little uncomfortable getting to some of these, but nothing too bad. That was probably the easy part of the whole job. With our chassis plate back in now, we can go ahead and start putting some of the other stuff back on. I'm gonna probably put the links first, I guess. It's just kind of bolts the chassis to this bottom plate here, along with some other screws as well. All right, so this is what I kind of hesitated on earlier. I ended up taking the motor out. You could put the motor back in before you slide all of this back in. I'm just gonna do it now since this whole assembly was lighter without the motor in it. So you can see we got the center diff apart here, and this one is definitely a little more used, I guess you could say, than the other two. This one's thicker as well. The manual actually says this one uses 500K fluid, so that's what I'm putting back in there. Just gonna add a little bit because it looks a little low. Not much at all, really. Now we just gotta get that back in the truck and we'll move on. And we got us some shock oil in. I wanted to go with 25 weight oil for these, but I couldn't find none that would get here in time. I went with 30. I don't really think that small difference is gonna make much of a difference. We'll see how it works out. If I don't like it, I can always swap out the oil again. You've seen me build shocks multiple times now. I think I've gone over it a bunch of times now, so I'm just gonna run through these real quick and we'll wrap up this video, get them back on the truck. And that'll do it. We have the truck back together now, all freshened up, ready to go back out and do some more bashing. Well, kind of. You might notice that back end's kind of sagging again, and we're missing a little bit here. Yep, we're still missing a shock. Turns out we actually had a bent shock shaft as well. And I went ahead and tried to bend it back, and when I did that, it broke clean off at the top. So we have some shock shafts on order as well. Unfortunately, this video won't be completely wrapped up, but it's just throwing a shock back on the truck and that'll be it. So for anyone like me who hasn't been into your Losi LMT just yet, I hope you found this video helpful. I definitely learned a lot. I learned I never want to take this transmission out again. Diff maintenance is really easy on this truck without getting to that. And now we have a fresh and clean truck, ready to go out and have some more fun with. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Make sure to subscribe if you're new around here and want to see more videos like this. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the LMT. And hey, if you saw my last video, if you still have any tips for me on doing different types of stunts, let me know those down there as well. As always, thanks again for watching. Peace.